This is Getting Started in NG91 Lessons Getting Started. This is a panel discussion, and the panel will introduce themselves. Go ahead, Brian.
All right. Thank you for joining. So before I introduce my panelists, I just wanted to introduce the GIS support in the next generation supply pipeline. And where do we begin? That's the point of this session. I've been bestowed 3 GIS panelists, data maintainers, to share with you different perspectives about GIS for 911. Originally, my plans were to have attendees provide resources and real-world examples with screenshots and helpful tips. But when I was preparing for this and we were having our first face-to-face meeting, virtual meetings, there was just so much to present and so many differences. So we had to find what would fit within an hour. So if you're a 911 system administrator or a dispatch supervisor, hopefully that you'll learn something about the issues that your GIS data providers are facing with. So let me introduce my panelists. We have Leslie Stovall, who works for Gila River Indian Community. She's been working there for 24 years. I think that's right, Leslie? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. And she established the physical addressing system for the entire community, working to build the GIS system, which includes standards and policies. Thank you, Leslie, for joining us. Next, we have Joanna. Joanna works with Northwest Fire. She partners with the city of Tucson. Joanna has been with Northwest for just about 3 years, but prior to that, she worked for the city of Tucson, so she's still assisting the city in essence. And last, we have Steve Whitney, who's been working in GIS for 32 years, and 12 of his Pima County staff have been working there just as long. He mentioned, thank you, Gene Trovia. So one thing is that there either be a lot of GIS openings in Pima County soon, or there'll be a lot smaller department.
Kind of both.
A little bit of both. Let me get you acquainted with each of the agencies about their background so that you have a sort of a picture of what these agencies are like. Here's some background bullets for you to learn about Gila River Indian Community. And from these bullets, you see Leslie is working in a small group of 5 staffers total, trying to build that enterprise system. She has about 23 end users for about a 600 square mile area. They support one PSAP, but they have a lot of mutual aid agencies, so they're interacting with a lot of different communities here, and we'll see a map of that here shortly. Leslie, would you like to explain anything else or add something else that's not listed here?
No.
All right. Here on getting a little more to see what Gila River Indian Community looks like, you can see this addressing community map. Leslie, can you explain to us what we're looking at here?
This shows the different addressing systems that are on Gila River because of where we're located. We're located between Phoenix and the city of Casa Grande. So we have Chandler, Chandler Heights, Coolidge, and Maricopa, Levine, and Phoenix that are surrounding us. So if anything happens closer to the boundary, then our mutual aid partners get to the scene faster than our public safety does. And they were getting confused coming on the community because of the addressing system. So we changed the addressing system up to make the areas that they would cover, our mutual aid partners cover, so that the address line would just keep going on to the community and it wouldn't break. The numbers wouldn't change drastically.
Great. All right. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Moving on to our next panelist, getting to know Northwest Fire, our second panelist from the Tucson area. From these bullets, you can see the background about Northwest Fire. Joanna, could you talk a little about your system setup?
Sure. I think ours is a little unusual. I came from the city. When I was at the city, I did part of this job. It's never been a one-man job. It's always sort of been a partnership between people. And I actually, if I'd found this earlier, I would have had Brian put it in. But I just found this, I don't know if everybody can get this diagram of the whole, this is the whole process of getting the map updated. And you can see that there's several databases going on. There's just a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving pieces. So it is a little bit complicated, just inherently. And so when I left the city, there was one person who was a manager who sort of took my role and did that. And it didn't, there was a lot of space in between map updates. So when I joined Northwest, one of the things they wanted to do was a continued partnership with the city. So that I could go to the city and help get that map out. And we're actually a team of, at this point, 3 people. We've streamlined it. Jessica Fravor has written a lot of the Python scripts to prepare the data and automate that process. And then I process the data through GeoMedia. And then we have a public safety analyst who actually puts the data into the public safety system, the test system and then the live system, because that is something you don't want to do wrong.
All right, great. You can see from that list, I mean, there's a lot of agencies involved there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Do each of those agencies have GIS staff, by the way, or is it just really just 3 people, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, the city obviously has GIS people, but for everybody else, we tend to handle their requests in terms of, getting in new streets or addressing situations. And I guess I get into this a little more later, but we have, it requires an ESZ layer, a zones layer for fire, and then one for police. And mostly I maintain both of those. And so people come to me when things change. But yeah, none of the other fire districts have a GIS person. And then this is just a map of our whole area and all the fire stations. And we have our zones extend outside of that in case we accidentally get calls outside of that. But that is the main area that we cover. Okay,
and I see that you've got 2 agencies that are going into Pinal County as well. So you're actually having to work with Pinal County staff as well?
Pinal is really good about putting their data out on a FTP server that we just download once a month and grab their data. And those scripts that Jessica has designed takes their data and our data, puts it together in a uniform data set so that we can load it into Intergraph systems.
All right. So let's get to know a little more about Pima County. And I know that many of you know Steve, might even know a lot of background about his agency. Being around for 32 years, obviously, he's been out in AGIC and well known. You can see it's a large area, over 9,000 square miles with 6 PSAPs. Also a lot of secondary PSAPs and a lot of non-GIS data for multiple purposes. Steve, you must have seen the entire system grow from almost an infancy when you started with the county. I'm assuming the county, I looked this up, was around 666,000 people in 2000, whatever, I don't remember time frame, and now it's over 1 million in the county. Sorry, off the subject. Would you like to share anything else more about Pima County from these bullets?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, the interesting part about that, seeing the system grow from the beginning, is I'm not sure exactly when our data started being used in the 911 systems. For some reason, it seems like it wasn't all that long ago, relatively, but I could be wrong. It's just we've gotten much more involved with 911 over the past few years. A lot of that can be attributed to Sandy when she was at the state 911 office. She basically lit a fire under all of our butts to get our GIS data going for 911. So that was great. So we work very closely with Johanna and all the other 911 organizations in the county, since we maintain a lot of the base countywide layers, such as address points and streets and parcels, the ESN layer as well, many others. So we value very much the feedback that we get from the user community, keeping us updated on things that are changed, things that aren't necessarily correct in the 911 systems. We specifically support the Valley Emergency Communications Center. They dispatch for areas including Arivaca, Coronado de Tucson, Green Valley, Elephant Head, Helmet Peak, and the Tohono O'odham Santa Fe district. Mm-hmm. They have an interesting system that consumes web services only. So we have set up a system, high availability ArcGIS server system for doing that, and that's been a really interesting project and challenge. What else? A lot of our 911, well, they're not 911 specific GIS layers, there are enterprise layers, things I mentioned like addresses and streets and parcels. They're used in other business systems in the county, so it can be a challenge maintaining those, and especially any type of enhancements we want to do to those layers. We have to take into account the effect that that'll have across all the systems that are using those layers, especially since at least our street layers, we have a linear referencing system built on that we use to model a bunch of different attributes, like speed limits, number of lanes that are useful to 911 as well. So those are some of the challenges we face, but as we mentioned, we have a lot of great staff that have been here many years that have been working with this and are used to keeping the needs of 911 in the back of their heads as they maintain the GIS data.
Awesome. Let's take some pictures of, look at some slides of your area. This is a visualization, obviously, of Pima County. Would you like to mention anything about what we're seeing here?
This is just an overall view of the county. You can see the incorporated areas: Tucson, South Tucson, Marana, Oro Valley, Sahuarita. So this is a typical view through a Vesta map, which are typically used for the call intake process.
All right, and we've got a few more slides of this. Here's another one. As you mentioned, as you can see, there's roads and address points, points of interest. Would you like to explain a little more about what we're seeing here from this Vista Map local map?
Sure. This just demonstrates the data that's available to the call intake people as they zoom into the map. You got your typical streets and your address points, and then areas of interest like the Sunrise Drive Elementary School that's shown here. Pretty typical of the Vesta maps. And one thing I'll mention about these is they've worked to standardize the look and feel of these, and in doing so, part of that trade-off is taking away taking away some of the control of the individual users to customize the map. And this was done to better support hot swapping the personnel between different PSAPs and dispatch agencies.
And as you guys are aware, Pima County also volunteers the State 911 office to help combine the data for AZ DPS, Department of Public Safety, in their VistaMap local updates as well. There are many people involved to make this happen. Can you explain a little bit about this process, Steve?
Sure. So this is another effort that was helped along and or spearheaded by Sandy, that twice a year we go out and ask all the counties for their data. Pima County doesn't. The 911 offices hired Terra Systems Southwest, Howard Ward's team, to gather in that data from all the counties, aggregate it together. We're basically talking about address points, streets, ESN boundaries, and MSAG communities. We also asked for parcels as well. And they put that all together into the statewide layers. And then Pima County's role in that is we simply take that data, do a quick QC of it, and then upload it to GeoComm, which then processes it into a mobile map package, and then that's sent back. We take another quick QC of that mobile map package and then send it off to the MSAG coordinator here, Patty Eggleston, and she loads it on the DPS servers for them to use.
So Steve, you may not be there forever. Do you think that the State 911 office would be able to take on that work?
We would like to see that. We've also suggested that Howard just take on that role since they're putting together the data anyway. We're still working on that. The 911 office is in flux a little bit off and on. That's the case right now. So we're hoping eventually it'll go that way.
Great. All right. So in this next slide, you shared with the AZ DPS map. This looks just like the previous map you showed, where there's streets and address points, and now that we can see some mileposts in there. The focus is on the state highways and interstates. The audience may not be aware that this map very well, but you can point out that there's some duplicate mileposts for the on and off ramps. Can you point those out to us maybe, or describe why we're saying that?
So this kind of exemplifies the DPS view. They typically only respond to state highways. Although all the same data is available here as the local map, if you zoomed in further, you'd see the parcel boundaries and the address points come on. But it's just, I use this example. This is the interchange of I-10 and I-19 here in Tucson, as how complex it could be for them to respond to an incident on one of these roads in this complicated interchange system. And then a lot of their reference that they use is based on milepost. And as we can see here, you'll see various locations of milepost 260, milepost 101. Those are the mileposts that come from ADOT. So they're more reference locations than absolute locations. So I don't have the answers. I don't have the full background knowledge of why there are all these duplicates. It's just a good example of the complexity of, number one, locating an incident in a situation like this, and number two, responding to an incident or guiding responders to an incident in this type of situation.
All right. Can you compare how Pima County sheriffs might be, the data for Pima County sheriffs might be different from the AZ DPS data, or is it the same data?
It's actually all the same. It's actually all the same, which is a good point. And then they use a little more. I mean, the sheriff's department and some of the other organizations. Well, I guess no, it is the same. I was going to say sometimes they'll dispatch into other counties, but really, if they have other county data in their system, it's all coming from these statewide data layers that we put together twice a year.
Great.
Brian, can I ask a question? This is Sandy.
Sure.
So, Steve, are you having to do any kind of segment breaks into for the interstate that support DPS?
Segment breaks.
Are you having to break the interstate, say at their district boundaries or at response boundaries, or you haven't had to institute any centerline breaks?
No. I think that's all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that's all handled by the GIS, and that's one of the great things about the increased use and functionality of GIS in 911 is 911 can now take advantage of the GIS analytics and things like geospatial overlays, point and polygon type on the fly analytics that they traditionally had to rely on just a straight database table as opposed to anything geospatial.
Could I jump in here for a quick moment?
Sure.
I don't, take Steve's thunder away or anything, but I'm
used to it.
Good. So we actually started using Pima County's data for our dispatch map 9 years ago, and have sort of molded it somewhat to our needs. But I'm looking at our interchange, our map at the interchange, and we've gone through and weeded out some of those mileposts. Visually, we've decided the ones I only have 260 twice, and there's an eastbound and a westbound, and we've gone and assigned addresses to all of those. And I'd have to go back and look at the data to remember what exactly we did, because like I said, we did it 9 years ago. But it's just sort of established, and that's what we're using, and it's workable on our system. I'd be curious to know how each of our different end users are experiencing mileposts, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. Unfortunately, we don't hear much feedback from DPS on the data and the use of it. I think that's a good point and note to take is we would love to get more feedback. We rely on that.
Right.
We're not the 911 experts, so we really have to rely on the user community to guide us in what works best for them.
That does bring up a good point, and we'll have a part of our session that we'll get into that a little more. We're going to get into some slides now, since we have a good background of who we're talking with, understanding their system. I wanted to paint that picture so that you guys would be able to understand what they're talking about when they're answering some of these questions. Panelists, this is going to be a multi-part question focused on your current 911 system and what you're supporting. The intent is not to provide people attending to know that they can any details, but to have those attendees be able to come and ask you questions maybe after the symposium, that they're sharing the same vendor or they're sharing the same processes that you're dealing with. This question is also to help identify if there's GIS data that you have that's being used for multiple systems, and how important that if you're using the same data for two different systems, that you identify if you have to make any changes to that data to two different systems, how are you managing that data for two systems and so forth? For all the questions from the slides on forward, I'm not going to read the questions word for word. I've just asked the panelists to answer the questions, and I'll just call on the panelists when to talk. So let's get started with the questions with Leslie at the Gila River Indian Community.
Okay. Our GIS data is basically the same data as far as our addressing goes. We have utility companies that use our addressing system, and they get that information from us. The E911 data is exactly the same. As far as our road center lines go, this is a screenshot of what the PSAP road center lines are. We maintain this layer for our PSAP, and so we have all of the routing and everything for everything around us, for all the communities that surround us. One of the reasons is that we own a piece of Williams Gateway up there in Mesa, by the airport. We have a golf course up there, and our public safety is responsible for that golf course. So we have to be able to get them from the community to the golf course. I don't know why that is, but that's the way it is. So most of the road center lines that we have, that we use for the PSAP, is what you see on the map, just for mutual aid partners. So the next map, this one here, these are the public roads on Gila River. You can see a big difference. For our public safety, we have a lot of trails that go across our community, and they're not public roads. They're only supposed to be for community members. Nobody else is supposed to be out there, because people tend to take a wrong turn and go out into the desert, and then we have to do a big search and rescue on them, looking for them. But these are actually all the public roads on Gila River. This is where anybody can drive, but it's very limited. And these roads here are given in our GIS system. These are the only roads that are shown in our GIS system. We do not show the PSAP roads in our GIS system.
I'm just going to flip back to that previous slide to show that. Maybe people didn't see that before, notice that before. So you can see, as you mentioned, those trails, yeah, and a lot more stuff on there on this versus that.
Yeah. Okay. Our data, we update the PSAP with all of our GIS data. We're the ones that maintain the data. We're the ones that update the data. Our communications administrator over there at PD is the one that finds our issues and our errors. She tells us, we fix them. Although she's gotten very, very good at fixing our errors for us, but we have to stop her from doing that. Let's see, the CAD software that they use is InformCAD, and it's fairly new to our community. And then the CAD system, or InformCAD, is the CAD software, and then our phone software is Maplex. And the same data goes into them. We have probably the ESN boundaries that we use. Those are just basically for 911. And we also have the, the EMS response areas, the ESN boundaries, the fire response areas, and the law response areas. And let's see, that's about it, the PSAP road center lines. Those are exclusively for our E911 system. The rest of the layers that they use, or the feature classes that they use through all their software, is what everybody else on the community sees and uses. Okay? Because our road center lines are different, we maintain two different feature classes. For our address system, we used to have names of people where they lived. but we had to take that out of there because we didn't want to maintain 2 addressing layers. It became too cumbersome. There's only 5 of us, and so we decided that we were just going to do 1 addressing layer. But then we created a layer for names for where people live, mostly the elderly. Because if anything ever happened on the community, we're looking at getting the elderly out first. So those are the people that we need to locate and take care of. So we do have a layer for our elderly. The community services department down here is the one that keeps it updated. We don't keep it updated. They tell us if somebody moved or if somebody's passed away, and we clean up our data, or we do what we have to do to keep our data as current as possible. Okay? I think that's about it.
Can you restate your CAD software and your phone mapping software for the audience again?
Okay, the CAD software is InformCAD, and the phone mapping software is MapFlex.
Great. All right. Joanna, could you answer the multi-part question for the audience?
Happily. What I work with is only the dispatch system, not the call taking and the intake. We use Hexagon's iCAD software, which we switched over to 9 years ago. And at the time, the city chose Hexagon because they wanted both police and fire to be on the same system together. And if you read the news, you may get mixed results on how that's actually going. But it's what we have. And so every month we do an updated map with routes. We pull out the old data and merge in new data and push it all back out. We have a map that goes on all the dispatch systems, all the dispatch stations, and then it also gets distributed out to the police cars, all the fire trucks, paramedic trucks, and battalion chief trucks. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, I think that the biggest difference between what you need for call taking and what you need for a dispatch system is we need to not just find people, but we need to be able to get there. And I do get a fair amount of feedback from people. Just today we had a fire at an address and they're using not the official address, they're using an address they made up. And I hear about it and we'll have a workaround for that. But being able to get to a location and getting there the quickest way possible, I hear a lot about. So we can't have gaps in street segments. We have to have gaps if there's a fence there. We have kind of a separate layer that we use to accommodate that. Street address ranges are very important, making sure that the address, the name and the suffix match up with the street name correctly. Otherwise, it may not link. Links between our address and our center lines are very important. Some of it we do manually, but getting that accuracy is really important. And so I hear a lot probably about that. I think I answered all the questions.
Great, thank you. Steve, how about Pima County? I think you might be on mute. There we go.
Sorry, thank you for the reminder. Fun with virtual conferences. So yes, our data is typically used in both computer-aided dispatch and phone mapping systems. As I mentioned before, the phone mapping systems are typically Vesta or Vesta-based, and the dispatch systems vary amongst agencies. They can include Spillman, Intergraph or Hexagon, as Johanna mentioned, Rapid Deploy, Central Square. I mentioned that the phone mapping software is typically Vesta, although VEC uses the same software, Rapid Deploy, for both their call intake and dispatch. And then it depends on the system. At least for us, again, Pima County GIS, we're not the 911 experts. We're the data experts and data providers. So I think the differences depend mainly on the type of dispatch system that they're using.
Great. So we need to move on. I feel like we might be running out of time, so let's moving to the next question. As I just wanted to restate, Gila River is only about 600 square miles. Northwest Fire is around 1,700 square miles. And Pima County, if you take out the federal lands, is about 2,600 square miles. So when we're talking about data aggregation, the second question, I'm asking if your agency produces and maintains all the data, or if you are aggregating data from other agencies. Leslie, let's start with you in this second question.
We get data from Pinal County, and that's to help us with our, like I said, mutual aid to go into Pinal County. As far as maintaining data just for Gila River, we're the only ones that maintain data for Gila River. I guess one of the big issues that we have is edge matching. When we get information from like Pinal County or from Maricopa County, which is rare, but it does happen sometimes, then we have to go through and we have to go and edge match all of the roads coming onto the community. And sometimes we have an issue with the way some of them match because they don't. So that's it. We barely share our data. It's rare that we do share our data for 911 purposes. I make sure we do share our data. But yeah, I guess I answered that question.
Great. Joanna, what about Northwest Fire data?
We rely heavily on Pima County data, and that's why Steve hears from me frequently. And we also pull in Pinal data, although that's only two little pieces of fire districts that there's not a lot of heavy traffic out there. So occasionally we come across something we send to Pinal. And then we have some supplemental data sets. We have a zone layer that is required for the system, and that has to do with, who gets dispatched where. We have hydrants. The city maintains, Tucson hydrants, and then there's three of our fire districts, Northwest, Boulder Ranch, and Rincon Valley, that we all use the same hydrant system where we do annual hydrant inspections, and so we add that data in. We've started doing sub-addressing for apartment complexes and trailer parks, townhouse complexes, and especially we're trying to get it along the city limits because the city and Northwest and Boulder Ranch all now have a mutual aid program. And a lot of our trucks will have a map, a bunch of paper maps of all of the complexes, or they have PDFs of them on both sides of the agencies, Tucson and Northwest. But we're trying to get them on the map in the truck so that when they have to run a call into somebody else's area, they know they can see where the house numbers are, or apartment numbers. And then we have some modification data sets for addresses and center lines where I think I mentioned if a road, technically the road goes through, but if there's a gate there with a lock, we obviously can't get through. So we have a part of our scripting system. It will remove that segment and it'll replace it with two segments that don't connect for routing purposes. We have a bunch of driveways and private roads that we've put in for the same reason. And I think that's it.
Great. And the audience, you might listen for similarities and differences between Steve and Northwest. So Steve, go ahead and answer the question for Pima County.
We mostly maintain all the GIS data. We do, as you've heard me say, rely on the user community for feedback on maintenance and errors. We work closely with the 911 and MSAG coordinators in the county to provide updates to the ESN boundary layer. There is some mishmashing, extract, transform, load, ETL processes to get attribute fields into NG 911 standards. But for the most part, it's a common data set that we will add fields to for NG 911 and such.
Great. All right. Here's another two-part question for my panelists. In regards to quality control assurance tasks for your data, would you give an example of a routine cleanup that you might do? And the second part is sharing any tools that you might have that you might use. Go ahead, Leslie.
Well, I mean, the best tool that we have right now for cleaning up data is just sitting at our desk and looking through everything. I have one tech that is basically assigned to cleaning up the data, and he works along with our communications administrator over at PD, which is Teresa. And Teresa works all night long, and she finds all of our errors, and then she emails us in the morning. It's pretty cool. But this is basically how we do it, but we do have access to MAPSAG and FME, and we're working on getting those softwares to work for us as far as going through a lot of things, and we're also working on getting that fishbone working for us because of our points, our address points and our road center lines. One of the big problems that we have is that we have a lot of rural addressing, and they could be like a half a mile to a mile off of the main road. And we have to address them off of the main road. So sometimes people get lost and they can't find where these houses are. So we have a lot of issues with being as rural as we are, and we're trying to work through them. But I guess we just sit there and we go through everything.
That's great. I'm glad that you were able to do that with the staff. Joanna, do you have examples of what Northwest Fire is doing with GIS data and any third-party tools?
Oh, sorry, I just had to answer the door quick. I'm the only one here. It's my turn, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Our scripting process goes through and looks for a lot of errors that we've come up with over the years. Address ranges in streets are huge. If there's an empty to from range, that's going to be a big problem for us. In fact, it'll drop that segment altogether, which can create a lot of routing errors. If the from is more than the to in the address range, it'll drop the segment. So we have a lot of scripts that look for that, for duplicate records, things like that. Mostly we catch everything through that. And of course, our zoning layers, we have a topology on to make sure that there's no overlaps or gaps. When we process that data in through the GeoMedia software, it will catch anything that we've missed and let us know. Sometimes our commonplace names, they don't match up with our addresses. We just have to go back and fix that.
Great. And of course, Steve of Pima County, any examples of work done with QA, QC, or in third-party tools?
So we currently don't have any formal procedures or processes in place other than the data editors follow SOPs in editing the data. We are starting to use AZGIV. And I just heard from Bo, responded in one of the chats today, that AZGIV now has a fishbone analysis tool built into it. So that's going to be interesting to see the results from that.
Great. I know that we're running out of time. we'll try to get through our last two questions here and have some time for the audience if you have any questions as well. We'll try to be brief on this question. I think we had talked, here and there about it. But Leslie, do you have an answer for the audience in regards to other systems that you might have to consider?
Yes, we also share our data with our telephone company down here and our utility company. So we have to, when they buy new software, we have to help them through it so that our data flows into their system.
All right. And Joanna, what about your agency? Do you have processes or something outside the 911 system?
Yes. So our Centerlines data becomes a little more comprehensive than just Pima counties, because we add in some other streets and such, and that gets used by our development services inspectors for routing. And then I also take that data and I use it to make a CAD down map, which is a paper map, and it's literally for when CAD goes down. And I do a network analysis on it, and so that from each fire station, I color code the streets according to what station is nearest, so that they'll call and somebody says, I'm at the intersection of Speedway and Euclid, and they look at that and it's purple. That means that station 3 is closest. And so that just helps in emergencies.
Awesome. And Steve, with Pima County,
as I mentioned before, we have some other enterprise business systems that utilize our data. The addresses and streets are used in development services, permitting processes, and building inspector assignments and routing. The transportation department uses the street network to track assets and maintenance of those assets. There's probably some others that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but yeah, it's a challenge, as I mentioned before, to keep all those systems in mind as you're maintaining the data.
All right. So, panelists, my last question to you is, do you have any advice for 911 data maintainers? Leslie, go ahead.
Yes. Ask for help. Ask for help from anybody and everybody, because there's always something there. Somebody's already gone through what you're going through, and there's probably already a fix for it. That's it.
Joanna.
Yes, absolutely. Ask for help. Get to know your people in the system. There's obviously the data fields that it needs, but also how does your system use that data and how does it work? If you figure out routing in an ESRI system, it's not how routing works in Hexagon. And, your users will come and they'll tell you what they think the problem is, which is great, and I appreciate it. But genuinely, I just need to know the to and the from, and then I have to figure it out. But it also means I have to know how their system works, not just the data. And the data is, of course, pretty critical. Also, if you're struggling to get cooperation, I always recommend cookies. And finally, there's a lot of room to be creative. And it's not creative like, look at this cool thing I did, because probably nobody else will appreciate it. But, 911 systems have a dispatch systems, they have a set format of how things need to be done. But there's usually a workaround. There's usually a way you can do it a little bit different so that the user gets what they need, and just be willing to think outside the box a little bit and do a little bit of a workaround, because nobody else will appreciate it. Your users will just think you finally got it done, but it does feel pretty good to think, I figured out an unusual way to get to the end need.
Awesome. And Steve?
Take advantage of the work that's being done through AGIC. That's my shameless plug for AGIC. For example, the 911 committee, all the good work that's gone into the AZ Give tool, and especially networking with your neighbors, be it within your county or between the counties that bound you. Take advantage of the experiences of all our great 911 colleagues throughout the state.
Awesome. All right. Sorry, audience, if we had to rush through that a little bit towards the end, but now here's your chance to ask any questions. So we squeezed in just enough time for you guys to ask some questions as well. If you have a specific question for one of the panelists, just be clear on that on your question if you use the chat, or if you are not gun shy, feel free to unmute yourself and ask that question. Sandy, do we have any questions in the chat that we need to start with?
No, sir. There was only a request from Chris Bertrand about sharing the names of the softwares, and Joanna and Steve has got that. Leslie, to verify, you said 9-1 map is MapFlex and CAD is Inform CAD, correct?
Yeah.
INFORM CAD, it's 2 words.
Inform, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Chris, I'll put that in the chat box in case you didn't get it.
And for you, anyone that is able to download this presentation, a lot of this content we had spelled out a little bit, so their answers may not be word for word, but it will be there will be some of the information in the PowerPoint from the AGIC proceedings. So, any other questions for our panelists before I finish up and do a wrap up? I do see one question in regards to AZ Gives from Melinda Lee. I can share with you what that looks like, Melinda, down the road here, maybe on the side. But it is a great tool that State 911 Office paid for and provided a contractor has built for us. And the intent of that was to what AZ Give stands for Geospatial Intake and Validation. So again, that is a tool that you could upload your data, do your validation, and even download a copy of it that would be in next gen or next generation 911 format if you needed it for a third-party tool or some other system that you're interacting with. If you had a CAD system that you were managing and supporting that the county didn't or could not provide for you. All right. I don't see any other questions. Is that? Oh, there's one more. Are there any good online resources start from scratch or near scratch? Resources? No, I mean, we're talking about resources, Chris, in regards to starting 911 support. Is that what you're asking? And Nina and Sandy has answered some of that there. There's a lot of information out there, but where do you get started? Yes.
Yeah, and even some of the vendors provide some good content between Datamark and Geocom. If you go to their sites, you can find, I believe, some introductory stuff getting started with your GIS data for 911. And Sandy, you can chime in on that for Datamark.
Actually, I was going to chime in for Nina. So, Chris, if you want to reach out to me, I co-chair the working group. We do have a draft document, and it's still in draft. It hasn't finalized, but there is a list of resources out there. So when you're starting from scratch at a road center line, where you may be able to go find existing authoritative data sets to help you get started. So If you'd like to reach out to me, I can share that information with you.
Yeah, and certainly depending on where you're at, perhaps neighboring communities. If you're at a city level, asking the county for some base information. If you're at the county, asking the state for resources that they would have, and so forth. So let me wrap up.
One quick thing too to add too. When we were
Sure.
starting out, we just asked Hacks at the time it was Intergraph. You know, who else uses this in Arizona? And we did reach out to different jurisdictions that were using the same software, and sometimes they were just way over our head because they were so far down the road. But that was always helpful to know that there was somebody out there to ask questions for, and know specifically about the system that you're using. If you have another agency that you can sort of lean on a bit.
Thank you, Joanna. Sorry for cutting you off earlier. All right. No more questions. I'll finish the wrap up, and I'll let you guys go about your day. And so, as you can see, there were some similar needs to build the 911 community. I feel like there is still more work need for working together. As data maintainers, they need to share processes. We need to share processes, how we do it. As data aggregators, there's more how-to processes that we could be sharing. As I think I heard, Leslie and Steve mentioned FME was a tool that they had access to. So perhaps sharing what they've built in there. Obviously, that's a little more challenging, but that's getting into the weeds here. Also, finding a common purpose to work together to support many different systems. Quality control in GIS should be sharing workflow processes with others and finding out how they created it. Improving GIS data across the state would be a future goal for the AGIC 911 committee. So, and how we do that could be upon you, the audience, if you come and join that committee. That's my wrap up for this, and I know there's a lot of information here, so we tried to make this presentation functional for the audience. So if you download it, again, after the symposium, this content hopefully will be embedded into the notes section for you to review. Thank you to Leslie and Joanna and Steve and Sandy for moderating. And last, I did put an appendix together so that when you download this, you have some of those items like the AZ Gives and how to get into it. I do believe it requires a login, so reach out to the State 911 office or myself or someone at AGIC, and we will get you in contact with Bo if you don't know Bo himself. All right. Any last words? Because I think we're just at 60 minutes there. All right. That's all that we have here, and our next. So remember to check out the breakout sessions as Sandy identified in the chat, and we have chair yoga this afternoon. Because you've been sitting in your seat since 9 o'clock this morning, if you had joined all day long. So, all right. Take care, everyone, and I will stop sharing.